In the autumn of 52 BC, a Roman general stood upon a hill in Gaul and faced the unthinkable. His army, outnumbered 10-1, surrounded by enemies on all sides, yet within weeks, the greatest rebellion Rome had ever faced would collapse beneath his will. This was Julius Caesar's defining moment, the Battle of Alesia, where courage, engineering, and sheer discipline reshaped the fate of Europe forever. By 52 BC, the Roman conquest of Gaul had dragged on for nearly a decade. The land that stretched from the Pyrenees to the Rhine was vast, rich, and fiercely independent. Dozens of tribes, once rivals, had been subdued one by one through Caesar's relentless campaigns. Yet Gaul was never truly conquered. Beneath the surface, resentment festered, waiting for a spark to ignite it. That spark came in the form of one man, Vercingetorix, the young and charismatic chieftain of the Arverni tribe. Vercingetorix was not merely a warrior, he was a visionary. Where other Gallic leaders saw only tribal boundaries, he saw a united nation. His dream was radical, to unite all Gauls under a single cause, freedom from Roman rule. He called for resistance, for scorched earth, for a war of attrition that would starve Caesar out of Gaul. His rallying cry echoed across forests and fields, across the highlands and valleys, and one by one tribes answered. Rome suddenly found itself facing not scattered resistance, but a national uprising. For Caesar, the situation was dire. The winter of 53-52 BC had been brutal, and his legions were spread thin, garrisoned across Gaul. When rebellion erupted, it spread like wildfire. Roman outposts were overrun, convoys were ambushed, even Caesar's closest allies among the Gauls turned on him. He was isolated, outnumbered, and deep in hostile territory. Worse still, the Roman Senate in distant Rome was growing restless. Caesar's political enemies, particularly Pompey and the Optimates, waited eagerly for any sign of weakness. A defeat in Gaul would not only destroy his military prestige, but also his career and life. Failure was not an option. Caesar knew he must crush the revolt decisively and quickly before it spread beyond his control. With characteristic speed and calculation, he gathered his scattered legions, marching through snow and storm to restore order. Town after town was retaken, yet despite these victories, the heart of the rebellion still beat strong. Vercingetorix fought not for single battles, but for survival itself. He avoided open combat, retreating into strongholds, harassing Roman supply lines, and laying waste to the countryside to deny Caesar food and forage. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. Before Alesia came failure, and it nearly cost Caesar everything. At Gergovia, the stronghold of the Arverni, Caesar suffered one of his few military defeats. Vercingetorix, familiar with the terrain and supported by local tribes, drew Caesar into a disastrous assault up steep, fortified slopes. The Roman legions, usually unstoppable, faltered under a hail of javelins and stones. When the dust cleared, Caesar had lost nearly 1,000 men, a devastating blow to morale. Across Gaul, news of Rome's setbacks spread like wildfire. Tribes that had wavered now joined the rebellion. Even the powerful Aedui, Rome's longtime allies, betrayed Caesar. For the first time, it seemed the Roman general might not return home victorious. But Caesar's genius was not in never falling. It was in never staying down. He withdrew calmly, regrouped, and analyzed Vercingetorix's tactics. He realized that the Gallic leaders' reliance on fortified towns could be turned against him. If the Gauls would not face Rome in open battle, Caesar would trap them behind their own walls and crush them through engineering and attrition. In the late summer of 52 BC, Vercingetorix and his army took refuge in Alesia, a hilltop fortress belonging to the Mandubi tribe. The location was formidable, perched atop a plateau surrounded by rivers and valleys, protected by steep slopes and wooden ramparts. Inside were around 80,000 Gallic warriors and thousands more civilians. It seemed impregnable. But Caesar saw opportunity where others saw only danger. He had roughly 60,000 men, 10 legions, exhausted, low on supplies, and deep within hostile territory. Yet instead of retreating, he made an audacious decision to besiege Alesia completely. If he could trap Vercingetorix here, the rebellion would die with him. Caesar's plan was nothing short of extraordinary. Knowing the Gauls inside would eventually starve, he ordered his men to build a massive ring of fortifications around Alesia, not just walls, but an intricate system of trenches, towers, and traps. The result was one of the greatest engineering feats in military history. First came a double trench, one filled with water from the nearby rivers, designed to block cavalry sorties. Behind these, the Romans constructed an inner wall, the circumvallation, stretching nearly 11 miles around the fortress, reinforced with wooden towers every 80 feet. But Caesar knew Vercingetorix would call for reinforcements from across Gaul. To protect against an outside attack, he built a second line of fortifications, the contravallation, facing outward, nearly 14 miles long. In essence, Caesar had created a fortress that surrounded a fortress, a Roman iron ring encasing Alesia. The soldiers toiled day and night under constant harassment from the Gauls above. Arrows and stones rained down, yet the legions pressed on, digging, sawing, and hammering with machine-like precision. They built Scippi, concealed pits filled with sharpened stakes, and Lilia, rows of deadly traps camouflaged beneath the soil. The ground around Alesia became a death field designed to shred any assault. Vercingetorix could only watch in disbelief as the Roman lines snaked across the valleys below, tightening like a noose. As the weeks passed, the situation inside Alesia grew grim. Supplies dwindled, horses were slaughtered for food. The civilians, thousands of men, women, and children, began to starve. Vercingetorix faced a cruel dilemma: feed his people and weaken his army, or save his warriors and let the innocents die. In desperation, he sent the civilians out of the city, hoping the Romans would take them as captives. But Caesar refused to open his lines. The refugees, tens of thousands of them, were trapped between the Roman walls and their own city gates. For days they begged for mercy. None came. One by one, they died in the fields, a grim reminder of what was at stake. The siege had become not just a test of strength, but of endurance and will. Then, as Vercingetorix had hoped, salvation appeared on the horizon. A massive Gallic relief army, perhaps as many as 250,000 warriors from across the tribes, marched to lift the siege. They encamped on the plains outside Alesia, surrounding Caesar's outer fortifications. The Romans were now trapped, enemy within, enemy without. It was the ultimate nightmare scenario for any commander. Caesar and his 60,000 men faced perhaps 3 times their number. Between them lay 2 walls, 2 battlefronts, and no room for retreat. Yet Caesar remained calm. He had planned for this moment. That night, fires lit the horizon as horns and war drums echoed across the fields. From the heights of Alesia, the trapped Gauls shouted in joy, answering the calls of their brothers below. The valley thundered with the sound of a united nation preparing for war. The next day, the assault began. At dawn, the relief army surged forward, striking at the outer Roman defenses. Waves of Gallic warriors hurled themselves against the palisades, while their cavalry circled to probe for weak points. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix's forces launched their own coordinated attack on the inner wall. For the first time, Caesar's double fortification faced its true test. The noise was deafening. horns blaring, catapults hurling stones, arrows raining from both sides. Roman legionaries fought with grim discipline, manning towers, repairing breaches, and counterattacking where the line wavered. Caesar rode along the ramparts, rallying his men, his crimson cloak marking him like a banner of defiance. For hours, the attacks continued. Then, as dusk fell, the Gauls retreated, battered but not broken. The Romans had held, but barely. The next day would bring even greater fury. Under cover of darkness, the Gauls struck again. Using ladders and bundles of brushwood, they attempted to fill the trenches and scale the walls. Torches flared, alarms rang. Across miles of fortifications, chaotic combat erupted. The Romans fought in darkness, guided only by the shouts of their centurions. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix led a sortie himself, his warriors pouring down the slopes in a desperate attempt to link with the relief army. But the Roman defenses, though strained, held firm. By dawn, thousands of Gauls lay dead before the ramparts. The relief army withdrew once more. Still, Caesar knew the next assault would decide everything. The Gauls would not give up easily. On the third day, the relief army changed tactics. They discovered a weakness, a section of the Roman outer wall built across lower, uneven ground near the hills. There, under the command of Commius of the Atrebates and other Gallic chieftains, they launched their largest and most coordinated assault yet. As tens of thousands attacked the outer wall, Vercingetorix led his entire cavalry and infantry in a simultaneous assault from within. The Romans were stretched to the breaking point. Trumpets blared. Dust and smoke filled the air. The sky seemed to shake with the roar of battle. Caesar, seeing the crisis unfold, personally led his reserves, his German cavalry and veteran legions, to the weakest point. He galloped to the front, shouting encouragement to his soldiers. The Romans countercharged with ferocity. Arrows, javelins, and stones rained down on the attackers. In brutal hand-to-hand combat, the tide began to turn. Then, in a daring maneuver, Caesar ordered his cavalry to ride around the outer fortifications and strike the Gallic rear. The sudden appearance of Roman horsemen crashing into the enemy's flank threw the relief army into panic. What began as a push for victory became a rout. Warriors fled in chaos, trampled by their own. From the walls of Alesia, Vercingetorix watched as hope burned away in the dust. By evening, the plains were silent. The Gallic relief army had been annihilated. The siege of Alesia was over. The next morning, Vercingetorix called a council of war. He knew the end had come. His warriors were starving, their allies destroyed, and the Romans unbreakable. Yet he chose to face defeat with dignity. Mounted on his horse, clad in armor, he rode out through the city gates toward the Roman camp. Before Caesar and his assembled legions, he dismounted, removed his sword, and laid it at Caesar's feet. In that moment, two worlds met: the proud freedom of Gaul and the relentless order of Rome. Alesia had fallen, Gaul was lost. The Battle of Alesia marked the end of organized Gallic resistance. Though scattered revolts continued for a time, the heart of Gaul's independence was broken. Within months, the entire region was under Roman control. For Caesar, Alesia was not just a victory, it was the victory. His triumph in Gaul cemented his reputation as one of history's greatest generals. When he returned to Rome, he was hailed as a hero. The Senate granted him a triumph, a grand parade through the capital, where Vercingetorix himself was displayed in chains before being executed. Yet beneath the glory, Alesia also sowed the seeds of Rome's future turmoil. The wealth and fame Caesar gained from the Gallic wars made him too powerful, too ambitious. Within a few years, his rivalry with Pompey and the Senate would erupt into civil war, a war that would end the Republic itself. The Siege of Alesia remains one of the most studied battles in military history. Caesar's use of double fortifications, circumvallation and contravallation demonstrated engineering genius and psychological warfare at its finest. It was not just brute force that won the day, but calculation, discipline and innovation. Historians often call it a masterpiece, an example of how logistics and fortification can triumph over superior numbers. But it was also a tragedy, a moment when a people's last hope for freedom was extinguished beneath the weight of empire. Vercingetorix became a symbol of courage, resistance, and the price of unity that came too late. Centuries later, the French would honor him as a national hero, a reminder that even in defeat, there can be glory. In his own writings, Commentari de Bello Gallico, Caesar described Alesia with cold precision, as if recounting a chess match rather than a human catastrophe. But between the lines, one can sense the magnitude of what had occurred, not just the fall of a city, but the birth of an empire. When the dust settled over Alesia, the world had changed. Rome's dominion now stretched from the Atlantic to the Rhine. The legions, once instruments of conquest, had become the architects of civilization. And at the center of it all stood Julius Caesar, soldier, statesman, conqueror, a man who had reshaped the destiny of Europe with a single siege. Today, the hill of Alesia stands quiet. The trenches are gone, the ramparts eroded, the cries of battle long faded. Only the wind whispers through the grass where thousands once fought and died. Yet beneath the soil, remnants of Roman fortifications still lie buried, silent testimony to the genius and brutality of the men who built them. Visitors walk the grounds and gaze upon the statue of Vercingetorix, erected centuries later by Napoleon III. On its base are inscribed the words «La Gaule unie, formant une seule nation, animée d'un même esprit, peut défier l'univers». Gaul united, forming a single nation animated by a common spirit, can defy the universe. A dream that came too late to save Alesia, but one that would echo through history forever. The Battle of Alesia was not merely a clash of armies. It was the moment Rome proved that discipline could overcome defiance, and that the fate of nations can be sealed not by the sword alone, but by the mind that wields it. What do you think was the key to Caesar's victory? His engineering brilliance, the discipline of the legions, or Vercingetorix's strategic mistakes? Share your thoughts below. Let's discuss how one battle changed Europe forever. Comment your opinion and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more epic history every week.